My name is Christopher Peter and welcome to another edition of the Christopher Peter Review. Your source for common sense commentary centered on facts, evidence, and data. I hope that we can educate you in an entertaining manner that allows you to come away inspired and informed. In this podcast episode, Impactful Decisions, we discuss the recent Supreme Court decisions released that will undoubtedly influence our political discourse heading into our upcoming midterms and down the line in 2024. In reality, the impact of these decisions may be more muted than what the political narratives will portray. Not surprising, but the exaggerations can prove dangerous, as we are currently seeing. Let us begin. In successive days, the Supreme Court of the United States expanded conceal and carry in America, to some degree, and overturned the landmark case Roe v. Wade, which afforded federal legal protection for abortion in America. America is currently experiencing another increase in violence related to guns. So the idea of expanding access and the ability to carry in public may rub people the wrong way on face value. Abortion has been a controversial topic debated by conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, since the landmark decision Roe v. Wade was handed down. Although, it took another case to establish a litmus test to make it somewhat functional. The debate is heated and greatly distorted for political purposes. For many it is a moral decision, while some want to make it appear to be a healthcare decision. Let us start with the guns. The first case pitted the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association against the State Police of New York, where the association challenged the legitimacy with how New York issued permits in regard to concealed carry. New York, which has some of the strictest gun laws in the nation along with recent incidents of mass shootings, required applicants to provide a special or unique reason to obtain a permit for a handgun outside the home. Meaning the applicant is required to provide a reason that the state deems acceptable for issuing the conceal and carry license. A major reason this became an issue in the first place was because New York denied applicants who claimed the need for self-defense as their special need. Given the significant increase in crime, the drive to reduce police funding and patrolling in New York, and no cash bail which returns suspected criminals back to the streets much faster, there is a legitimate need for people to feel like they need to take the personal protection into their own hands. The Supreme Court ruled that the requirement for a special or unique reason for practicing one's explicit constitutional right was an infringement of the Second and 14th Amendment. The conflict in the case was that New York required applicants to prove the need for their rights rather than the government bearing the responsibility of proving the applicant should not be granted a license. While New York Governor Kathy Hochul parroted some misleading claims about gun rights and delivered a politically hysterical response, during her attempt to earn the seat she inherited, she must understand that vast majority of states use the valid process to issue these licenses, where the government bears the burden of proving the need to deny rights, as is intended for many of our freedoms. She must also be honest and not pretend like there are no background checks and measures already in place. And deflect responsibility for the failures that her government made in granting licenses despite background issues found. That is not a problem with gun rights, but government competency. The Constitution was never meant to put restraints on the rights and freedoms of the people, but restrain the government power to oppress and limit the people's freedom. Thus, the people do not bear the responsibility to prove they deserve the rights explicitly expressed in our Constitution. The government must bear the burden to show there is a valid interest in restricting the use. In the case of our constitutional gun rights, the Supreme Court acknowledges that there is a legitimate need to regulate guns, but it cannot infringe on the clearly stated constitutional rights by placing a burden on the applicant when there is no documented standard. Without a standard of what constitutes an acceptable special need, then the government creates a trap to deny every applicant they choose. This is clearly unacceptable. The decision does not prevent the government from regulating guns or licensing. It just makes sure the government does it in a manner that is consistent with our Constitution. The more controversial ruling involved the reversal of a landmark decision decided 50 years ago, where the Supreme Court at the time ruled that the Constitution afforded abortion rights despite there being no mention of the controversial practice in the text of document. That is simply a fact. People who deem themselves pro-choice frame this discrepancy as the Constitution being a living and breathing document that evolves over time. A sentiment they obviously do not apply to gun rights with their musket references. But, our interpretations of the words and texts may shift over time. One cannot distort the meanings that cannot be logically drawn from the written text. Most elected officials do not want to be on record as sanctioning the illicit ending of life for the purpose of deflecting responsibility or accountability of their own choices. Many accept the traditional conditions of the usual compromise, which makes the procedure more acceptable when there is a direct threat to the life of the mother or unborn baby, or if the pregnancy is a product of rape or incest. The reason the issue became an intense battle in the last decade was the radical members of the left that went beyond the compromise and attempted to normalize the procedure as an acceptable form of birth control, when there are a plethora of other options available. In response, the right responded and the issue became a hot-button topic again. The left want to make it appear like it is a normal health procedure. The right argues from a moral and protection of innocent life standpoint. In the eyes of the current Supreme Court, the decision shows that the court felt that Roe v. Wade was decided incorrectly by determining the words and text of the Constitution cover the practice, when it clearly does not. Should a woman be forced to be a mother? Should society protect the right for innocent life and the potential for life? These are questions the court did not attempt to answer, and neither will I. The decision simply reverses the Roe v. Wade decision on technicality. This essentially puts our political figures in a difficult and challenging spot. For decades, politicians could fall back on the narrative of Roe v. Wade being the law of land, or using the landmark decision as a wedge issue for civil conflicts. Now, the court said that elected officials need to make the decision over the legality of the controversial practice. I think we all can take solace in the fact that abortion is not as acceptable in the minds of many as it is constant decline for quite some time now. Many are turning to different alternatives and choosing more compassionate options. There are more services that help women make it to birth and find adoptive parents. These are options that society should foster. The traditional compromise for acceptability where the mortality of the mother and baby were at risk was a reasonable one and one that does not need to be set aside. Unfortunately, the political left bears the blame for pushing the boundaries of the issue to normalize the practice and make it more prevalent. The right has pushed back as the progressives have gone beyond the realms of morality. In many areas, not just abortion. I think the fact that the practice is reducing in number is a great step forward. This decision is shocking and one that many did not really believe was possible. But, the states now will decide whether the practice is acceptable and what limits we need to place on it. Will America have a culture of life or moral irresponsibility? That is up to the states.
My name is Jennifer Smith and welcome to another important edition of the Christopher Peter Review podcast. This year has been a very important session for the United States Supreme Court. Many sessions come and go without much fanfare. This one featured an assassination attempt by left-wing crazies and radical fervor from an illegal leak of a decision. While there is little fanfare and debate over every decision reached by the highest court in America, these decisions have a significant impact on our way of life and how laws passed are able to exist or be set aside. For many, the Supreme Court is the third level or third branch of the federal government. Technically, the legislative branch, Congress, would be the highest, but in the minds of many, the executive branch, the president and cabinet, hold the top spot. In reality, they are all co-equal branches of government for those needing a basic civics lesson. The fanfare over the reversal of Roe v. Wade is largely over the question for some women who question whether they will be forced to be a mother when they are not ready to, or simply because they were not prepared or responsible enough in a momentary lapse of judgment. As President Obama once put forth, that the debate should focus on reducing the number of abortions rather than the legality of the practice. Provide viable alternatives. There are plenty of people who lack the ability to bear children. There are opportunities to help these women choose a compassionate alternative to ending life. In regard to the ruling, the Supreme Court should decide cases based on the legality of the issue, not the political circumstance. The traditional compromise around the issue makes sense, but the progressive left pushed the boundary so far that led to a response by the right. For quite some time, many legal minds questioned whether the Roe ruling was legally sound. Some people on both sides of the aisle seem to agree to some extent that it might not be. And now, we know it is not. Set aside the emotions or the political arguments that are hysteria drive or not, the Constitution does not directly address abortion. Pregnancy is not cruel and unusual punishment, but a biological manner in which we all exist today. I do not believe anyone expects a woman to have to proceed with a birth when there is a direct threat to the life of a mother, but we also do not terminate life when there is little to no direct risk. Even if there are statistical risks. The laws that have been enacted have not outlawed abortion due to medical risk, but reined in the expansion of the practice to resemble more reasonable norms. Even with these new laws, America is unfortunately more liberal on the practice than our more liberal European allies. Elected officials will now bear the responsibility to address the issue and see if they are willing to protect the sanctity of life. The expansion of gun rights obviously is a challenging reality in the face of the current situation. After the frequent mass events that claimed innocent lives, No one wants to see these events happen. No one seems to have a real answer to the problem. Except blame the piece of metal. The new law signed by Joe Biden will not really do much to prevent these events from happening. They have to look like they did something. I like the fact that the federal government is addressing the need to expand mental illness support to address the issue and act on school security. If we can provide for the security of a non-NATO ally, we should be able to also improve the security protocols of our public schools. Many of our government buildings have way better security than the ones we send our children into. The ruling addresses the constitutional trap that New York put in place to deny applicants their right while pretending not to. Without defining the standards for special needs, there is no way to assume the government does not intend to blanket deny every applicant in order to achieve a biased political objective. We should support legal and law-abiding gun ownership, but understand that the state bears the responsibility for proving an individual is devoid of their constitutional right. We should not have to prove our need for an explicitly stated constitutional right. While New York Governor Kathy Hochul overreacts to the ruling is right. New York is infringing on the rights of law-abiding gun owners. The Supreme Court is an apolitical branch of the federal government. The congressional leaders and Joe Biden are political leaders speaking on behalf of a base. Especially as they head into a midterm election. These decisions are controversial but correct. The reactions to these decisions show who the autocrats are and who the democracy defenders are. Those calling for stacking the court are not representatives of an American democracy. Keep in mind how many of these individuals will talk about democracy and threats to it. But look at their actions and determine whether they are truly defending democracy or using it as a convenient buzzword. Republicans did not call for stacking the court after it incorrectly held up Obamacare.
The recent Supreme Court decision did not stop the government from regulating how guns are accessed or where guns are able to be brought. It did not overrule gun-free zones or gun control methods. Afterwards, the federal government was able to come together to take some reasonable actions to address issues that lead to these mass events. The focus of the bill is to provide resources for mental health, which is a major area of the problem. Additionally, the bill provides more resources to improve security at our school. Consider any government building, at your local, state, or federal level, and how secured these are. In certain ones, you cannot even use your cell phone. Many forbid recording of any kind, although they record everything you do and possibly say. It makes sense that the government buildings we send our children to should be secured. Of course, we do not want an environment that feels like prison, but we can balance security with an environment that is conducive to education. If you do not feel safe, then how can you learn? Finally, there is an expansion of information that will be included in background checks for buyers under 21. This is reasonable because the government issuing the license should have all the historical information needed to make a sound decision. While the government bears the burden of proving the risk, the person should be as transparent as possible and the government should have access to every data point relevant to reach a decision. What was left out of the final legislation was the proposed increase in age from the current 18 to 21. I can understand why it is controversial, but I am not sure a person right out of high school or still in high school really needs access to a gun of any kind. A valid requirement should be a certain period of time after separation from high school. While this does not preclude some mentally insane person from simply returning later on, it can help keep a current student from obtaining a weapon while still enrolled. Also left out was the capacity restriction, which does not really make much sense. I agree that someone does not need high-capacity cartridges for personal protection. But, it also does not really do much. These are reasonable measures, but not a stopgap. My hope is that the funds and programs aimed at mental health will enable our public schools to reach these students before they make the decision to commit these heinous crimes. If they can help these students address the source of their anger and resolve them in a healthy manner. My hope is that the money is not just used to boost some guidance counselor's salary, but actually put to good use.
The bill may come up short for what the progressive left, who are staunchly anti-gun. The bill may be somewhat more than what the right, who back gun rights, want to see. But I believe it is a fair compromise. There are some voices that want to criticize Republicans for taking part in this bill, but it is important that there is involvement from both parties on all critical legislation. You can shape a bill when you do not have a voice in the room. You cannot stop the real bad stuff from being included if you hold out any sort of cooperation. I believe the Republicans did a good job working with their Democrat colleagues to craft a bill that is reasonable and does not infringe on gun rights. I believe the important issue of mental illness was addressed. And mental health support needs to be beyond just what is available at schools. Mental health is just as important as physical health. If you do not address the mental issues that impact your daily life, then you may be unable to address the opportunities or challenges life has to offer. This is not just true for students, but all people. There should not be a stigma for people who seek help. They had the courage to seek help. The government has a valid interest in making it affordable. Unfortunately, healthcare affordability is not a strong suit for the government.
I am not sure there is enough concern or attention being paid to the decline in the value of our financial markets. For many in the progressive left, the idea of stock markets, bond markets, or investing is tied to activities of the rich. But that is naive. All people should be investors. That is a great avenue to expand your wealth beyond your paycheck and provide you an area of your financial picture that you have greater control of. As I have said in the past, my foray into investing began with a $500 bonus received in my place of employment at the time. Little did I know that making the decision to invest would help me financially support my pursuit of an MBA and provide bridge funding for some bumps in the road. It has become a part of my daily life and something that I enjoy. Being an economist provides me with a natural interest in markets, but the numbers, analytics, and modeling is really exciting and beneficial. The one aspect of investing that is challenging to me is when downturns happen. This is when my patience and opportunity-seeking instincts need to be at peak performance. Remember, you only lose or gain in markets when you actually sell the asset. Understanding the quality of the investments and the underlying performance of the organization or entity you are investing in is important to know if you should cut your losses during a downturn like we are experiencing or double down. During times like this, there may be benefits to expanding your portfolio while prices are affordable. But there are risks. Knowledge, research, and information are valuable assets that you can reasonably attain without much cost. I do not give financial advice, but I do believe more people should invest to expand their financial reach. Politically, I am not convinced the people in power really understand that our financial markets are not just for the rich, but impact all aspects of society. Our financial markets are a source of our greatness and economic might and what helps make many things possible. The Biden administration needs to do more to shore up confidence in our economy and markets. Need to do more than use their platform to attack our producers who operate in an unfriendly regulatory environment.
The expansion of prosperity in America will not come with redistribution but when people are afforded greater access to expand their wealth beyond needing to request higher compensation, promotions, or career transitions. Those are all important, but the most controllable way to bolster your financial position is to invest to some degree. There are many people who found ways to retire early, afford better quality purchases, or pay for tuition through investing. Now, I am not trying to sell our viewers on any investment strategy, but I think just finding one that works for you is important. Our political figures need to stop demonizing activities that help expand wealth and economic freedom. Especially when many of these voices invest themselves. It is a concept that is difficult to wrap your head around, but there are more opportunities for low-cost entry to investing than ever before. It would be a wasted opportunity to not find some money to grow to offset reliance on your day job. Success does not happen overnight and there are risks. But there is an opportunity now where most people see depressing news. Many tech stocks are now affordable, including companies like Apple and Amazon who have proven track records to give you faith they will exist in the next 10 years. The Biden administration should not let this be another area of decline for a presidency that has little areas of success. America cannot build back better in the face of inflation, violence, autocracy, and dependency. As we close this episode of the Christopher Peter Review, we thank you for taking the time to experience this edition of the Christopher Peter Review podcast. We truly appreciate your viewership and continue to collaborate to ensure we offer common sense and informative content. The Christopher Peter Review is part of the Christopher Peter channel, where we provide not only the original podcasts, but additional content as well. Common sense commentary on our current events can be experienced weekly on the channel. Access our social media style pieces as well as curated news feed on the Christopher Peter channel. The focus is always providing objective common sense analytical content centered on facts, evidence, and data. We leave the partisanship and political hysteria to other sources. Please continue to visit www.crcrvw.com for more content and commentary. Please check back next week for another podcast episode of the Christopher Peter Review. Until next time.